This is our interview section, and I have with me one Dr. Michael Goldstein, man of many medical talents. I'm sure he'll explain, but like other doctors, he's decided he's got to step into the ring. So through a remarkable series of efforts by him and the people who work with him, he's gotten to the point where he was a no-show at the convention to now keeping the nominee, Jayme Stevenson, up at night. And so now we'll get him to tell his story.
Sure. Where do we begin? So, at the convention, I did not get the nomination. I was not the party's choice, so I decided to become the people's choice.
Right.
And I went out and got petitions, and we started out in the exciting places of Greenwich and the town garbage dump, which is the number one place where you get to meet and greet the average regular person. It's a very democratic place. People come in and you walk up to them and ask them if they're a Republican. Some of them ignore you. Some of them say, I'm not buying anything today. Some of them tell you to drop dead. Some of them tell you should be ashamed of yourself. And then some of them sign your petitions.
Right.
And from there we went to Home Depot or ShopRite. We went to parades.
Where I met your son, by the way.
Yes. Right. And we had and then we started getting volunteers, and we went to other supermarkets and other parts of the state. We had people door knocking in some of the smaller towns, and in some miraculous process, we got about 3,700 people assigned petitions.
And what was the threshold?
Well, we needed 1,964 valid petitions, and we had over 2,450 valid ones.
So you almost doubled it.
Well, we're 500 over the valid ones, because about a third of them get rejected, because there are people that think they're Republicans that are really independents, and some of them are even Democrats.
Oh, jeez. Okay. That I wouldn't have expected. Okay.
And the message that we got from the people at the dump and at the supermarkets and at Home Depot was that they're sick and tired of career politicians. This included the independents and even the Democrats.
Okay, I'm going to have to interrupt with the classic question. Election to election, through the cycles, how many incumbents get reelected in Congress?
95%?
It's up there. It's 85.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Which is ridiculous. So, okay, it sounds like they say one thing and do another.
Well, I don't know if it's there are many people who didn't even know who Jim Himes was. So I think there's a lot. You're right. You're sitting there in shock, right? He's been a congressman here for 14 years, and I would say at least a quarter of the people didn't know who he was.
Okay. Well, if they didn't know about him, well, they certainly didn't know about her.
And they certainly didn't know about me.
They know you better than they know Jim Himes.
Isn't that scary?
Yes, it is. That's right. It's after a good start.
We probably saw about 35,000 people in this process. So.
Right. Yes. That's how you do it.
Yeah.
I only admire what you're doing. It's just that's what you do. That's how you do it.
And so if I didn't have strong convictions about my beliefs and believe that what I was doing was the right thing, I certainly wouldn't show up at a garbage dump at 7:30 in the morning and put up with a certain level of congratulations and abuse at the same time.
Right. Well, that's, how should I say, this is the strangeness of life, right?
It is, but it's truly getting out to the people. So we, in the convention there were 154 people that voted for Jayme Stevenson, and I have 2,450 people that supported me. So I think I'm ahead of the game at this point.
All right, well, let's focus for the moment on the issues around abortion.
Sure.
Okay, because this seems to be the really defining aspect in this primary.
Yes. One of the things that people misunderstand, having both a medical and legal background, is the actual meaning of the decision. Okay. And the decision essentially said that the Supreme Court said, we don't write laws, the people write laws, and we have no business writing laws, and we're returning the power to make laws on abortions to the people. So when people scream that this is the end of the world and the world is coming to an end, they should be actually grateful for the fact that the Supreme Court is saying, it's up to the people to write the laws. That's what a democracy is about. It's the people rule. So it's actually a good decision. They also made one about administrative agencies that said the same thing. Administrative agencies don't rule, it's the people that rule. So the Supreme Court is returning power to the people.
Right. That's part of this larger issue. Steve Bannon's brought it up, where he's saying that it's a series of rulings. The Roe v. one against Roe v. Wade being just one of them, where they're basically putting the administrative state back in its place.
That's true. That we need them. The administrative state has become far too powerful. It destroys every business. It destroys progress. For example, in medicine, the average doctor spends 20 hours per week doing regulatory compliance work. People go to see a doctor, they're looking at a computer.
Wait, 20? Isn't it like half of 40?
Yes, but the average doctor
Well,
works more like 50, so yes, but it is. I mean, if you go to a doctor, you see them just typing on a computer and ignoring the patient. You're supposed to talk to the patient, not to the computer screen.
Right. So hopefully, but this has been part of a long enduring problem, right? Because when you look at the quote healthcare dollar in different countries, America is the highest. It's 25 cents out of every healthcare dollar spent on administration.
Yeah,
whereas the Swiss and others like them is like 10, 12 cents on the dollar.
And we spend $4 trillion on healthcare, so do the math, we're spending $1 trillion on administrative expenses, and even if we got it down to 10, that would be $600 billion of money that's being wasted.
I mean, it's the whole thing is mine.
Which you want me to start with?
I'll take education first.
Okay.
So, I mean, has she articulated a position on education?
I mean,
Jayme, yeah.
Well, I know that in her schools, in Darien, they have CRT, so...
Oh, okay, well, I mean, but has she spoken out against it?
Yes, after the fact, and I am a strong believer that parents have the right to advocate for their children, and I believe that the education process should be a process of education and not indoctrination. Mm-hmm. We need to prepare our students for the 21st century economy so that we can remain a first world country rather than become a third world country.
What about homeschooling?
Look, I think homeschooling is an option. I also think school vouchers are an option. I think charter schools are an option. For example, in my practice in New York, I've seen, kids from the Bronx, and when you see one of them coming in wearing their charter school, uniform, the parents are smiling and happy, and they know their kids got a shot at getting ahead, as opposed to going to a public school in the Bronx where they have no hope.
Yeah, right. So then let's talk about taxes. I mean, so what can I say? I mean, go ahead.
The more you tax, the less you collect. I mean, there was for example, Jim Hines wanted to raise the capital gains tax, and yet they found there's an article in the Wall Street Journal that talked about by lowering the tax rate, they're actually collecting more money because businesses are coming here rather than leaving, and they're making more money, so they're paying more taxes.
Right. That's the old Laffer curve out here. We'll talk healthcare in general. You want to talk about that?
Sure, why not? I mean, we have a healthcare system that's doing the opposite of what it's supposed to do. This healthcare system is what we call consolidating. Hospital systems are getting bigger and bigger. Medical care is becoming more and more anonymous. Private practitioners are being driven out of business, and there's a demand and the patients have a lot of trouble communicating with their doctors in a healthcare system.
Okay, sure.
Essentially, they have a call center, and in the call center, people call. It's like booking a flight in an airline. Oh, you want to see Dr. Jones? Well, he's got a 5:35, leaving from Paramus in his New Jersey office, or you can go to the one in Poughkeepsie next Tuesday. I mean, it's anonymous care. A lot of people that have semi-urgent problems if they could actually communicate to a doctor, they could get there. Stay out of an emergency room and save money. The other thing is, as healthcare has become consolidated, care's gotten more expensive. So, for example, if you go to a hospital system, they can get paid 3 times as much from the same insurance company for an in-network visit as a private practitioner.
And what? Why? How? I don't understand.
Bargaining power. The insurance companies can't do without them, so they drive a much harder bargain. So, for example, sometimes it's even worse. So, for example, about 15 years ago, my wife needed physical therapy at a local hospital, and I broke my finger and I needed physical therapy, and I went to a private person in Manhattan, and we had the same insurance. The insurance company, there was a $50 copay, so the private person got paid $55, of which $50 was a copay, which means she got paid $5 from me, and the hospital got paid $200, of which $50 was the copay, which was 4 times as much for doing essentially the exact same thing.
Yeah, but God, I mean, talk about getting into the weeds. In terms of being confronted with having to fix this mess, I can just imagine the legislative process, and it will not be pretty. In fact, I would prefer to make sausage. Just saying. Will you accept the congressional pension?
I don't know if I got there, if I'd even be there long enough to get it.
Right. Yeah, well, but if you are there long enough, it will come up. I mean, I want to echo Ron Paul, I believe, who is the one who refused any of the perks that Congress wanted to throw his way for being a member.
I think you have to be there for 5 or 6 years to even get a pension, and I think at that point the amount's so small that I don't think it would even make a difference to me.
Okay, then it'll be easy to say no. We saw so many examples of doctors having somehow turned into something we never recognized or saw before, especially when it was built around vaccination. And the whole system just lost its sense of humanity, and they were just following orders like robots. And it's something I still can't get over.
I have a lot of difficulty with it too. There's different reasons. So, for example, if you have the doctors that worked in hospitals that saw people that are really sick and saw people that were dying, or had some of their friends get sick, or had some of their friends die, obviously, saw the vaccine as something that was a huge lifesaver. So they embraced it rather quickly, based on, because they saw a different percentage of the curve. They saw like the bottom of the curve. They saw the worst of the worst. Yeah. So that's why the hospital-based physicians did embrace it. A lot of the others, I'm not sure. What's bizarre to me is that there's no understanding or exception of natural immunity or acquired immunity.
Yes, that's right.
And for example, in every other illness, so for example, in a hospital, like you have to prove that you have been immune to different conditions. Oh, Grace.
All right.
Anyway, I'll turn the...
Naughty.
No, sorry about that. Anyway, so what happens is that you have to have titers. If you have a titer to like the measles or mumps or chickenpox, you don't need to be vaccinated. But somehow, if you have a titer to COVID, you do. It doesn't follow the science. There's been studies in Israel and everybody place else that shows that natural immunity is better than vaccine immunity, for the simple reason that the vaccine only makes you immune to the spike protein. And if the spike protein changes its shape, then your immunity is not as good, which is what we're seeing now.
It does. Spike protein changes its shape.
Absolutely.
To what degree? I mean, are we talking about you're talking about mutations?
Yeah, mutates. Okay. Yeah, so the different variations have a different shaped spike protein. So if you're immune to the spike protein and it's not the same anymore, it doesn't work as well.
Right. I was thinking more of what's that word? Denaturation. You're there. It's your first day on the job. What is your short list? What is your to-do list? What legislation are you going to propose?
Okay. Well, among the things, of course, is I'd like to make sure that we actually follow the science in COVID. I think that we need to actually have an independent investigation of COVID, how it's been managed, why businesses were shut, why others weren't, or did we really follow the science? The second thing I would like to do is what I would call regulatory reform, break down the regulations that paralyze healthcare, that paralyze every industry, that makes small businesses not competitive because they don't have the manpower to fulfill all the government mandates, and they're getting put out of business. So I want to get the government off the back of businesses.
Right. Also one thing that was left out, and I guess we'll wrap up with this, is a lot of these things also impair my favorite subject, innovation.
Well, it's interesting. That's absolutely true. I actually had an opinion that was published as a letter the other in the Wall Street Journal, specifically on that regarding COVID. So California wanted to pass a law that would essentially block doctors talking about COVID, and there were 3 doctors they printed, and I was the only one from the East Coast. The other 2 were from California, and it's they wanted everyone that you could only do what's the standard of care. The problem is what's the standard of care, what's considered unacceptable into the standard of care today, tomorrow becomes the standard of care. That's how you get innovation, by people trying new things, people trying different approaches, and when they work, then we have progress. When there's no new innovation and there's no new treatments and there's no new options, we have stagnation and we go nowhere. Right. And if you want healthcare to go forward, you need innovation. You need to free doctors. You need to let doctors be doctors and let them treat patients rather than politicians treating patients.